Hey everyone, ready to dive into something a little different? Let's talk video. And I'm not talking about just hitting record on your phone. We're going deep on how to make your videos stand out.
That's right. We've got a treasure trove of insights thanks to video pro Samantha Morgan.
From traditional media to online content, she's seen it all. And lucky for us, she's sharing her secrets in her talk, Why Video Matters.
We're dissecting her talk, pulling out those golden nuggets of advice.
Whether you're a newbie or you've been around the block a few times with a camera, this deep dive is for you.
Because let's be honest, video is everywhere these days.
You're telling me it's like every other post on social media is a video now.
Exactly. And Samantha drops this truth bomb right at the start of her presentation. Get this. A whopping 85% of online content is video.
85%. Okay, wow. I knew video was big, but that's a whole other level.
It really highlights just how much the digital landscape has shifted. If you're not on board with video, you're missing out on a huge chunk of your audience.
It's like trying to send a telegram in the age of instant messaging.
Pretty much. And get this, 90% of consumers say video helps them make buying decisions.
So basically, I should swap those long product descriptions on my website for some snappy product demos.
Now you're getting it.
Yeah.
And if you're all about that SEO life, listen up. Google videos are 50% more likely to hit that coveted first page of search results.
Video SEO, it's the new frontier. All right, you've convinced me video is king, but how do we actually create videos that look, professional?
That's where Samantha's practical tips come in. She starts with the basics, camera settings.
Which can be a bit of a black hole if you're not a tech wizard.
Totally. But she breaks it down so well.
Yeah.
She totally debunks the myth that you need to be filming everything in 4K.
Yeah, I'll admit I've definitely fallen into that trap. Higher resolution equals better quality, right?
Not necessarily. Samantha points out that for most people, especially if they're watching on their phones, HD is perfectly fine.
In fact, she said using 4K when you don't need to is just creating these massive files that clog up your storage.
She's all about working smarter, not harder. Save that 4K for when you really need it, like those epic drone shots. Or if you think you might want to zoom in on something during editing.
Gotcha. So HD for the everyday stuff, 4K for those special occasions.
Exactly. Then she gets into frame rate. That's basically what controls how smooth your video looks, which is especially important for things like slow motion.
Oh, like those super smooth, almost dreamlike slow-mo shots you see in movies.
Yes, if you want that cinematic slow motion, she recommends shooting at least 60 frames per second. She actually showed some side-by-side comparisons in her talk, and the difference was incredible.
Okay, I'm definitely taking notes on that one. Now, I know a lot of our listeners, myself included, are working with just our phones. Any tips on how to maximize what these little devices can do?
Absolutely. One of my favorite takeaways was her advice on mastering autofocus lock.
Okay, autofocus lock. Tell me more about this because I feel like half the time my phone is trying to focus on the wrong thing.
Right. And it's so jarring when your video is sharp and then suddenly goes blurry because your phone decided to focus on a tree in the background instead of your subject. Samantha shows how locking your focus can prevent that, keeping your subject sharp even if they're moving or you're moving the camera around.
So no more accidental blurry bloopers.
Exactly. And while we're on the topic of taking control, she also talks about manually adjusting your exposure to get a more cinematic look.
Oh, exposure. That's something I struggle with. My videos always seem to be either too bright or too dark.
It's all about understanding light and how your camera sees it. She walks you through how to lock your exposure to avoid those subtle shifts in brightness. You know, when you're filming outdoors or in changing light and the scene just gets brighter or darker, it's super helpful.
That makes total sense. It's those little adjustments that can really elevate your video. It's funny. I'm listening to all these tips, and it's like learning a whole new language, the language of video.
It really is. It's like learning the grammar and vocabulary of visual storytelling.
And just like any language, there are different dialects, different ways of using video to achieve different effects. Samantha makes a good point about how a social media reel is a totally different beast than, say, a video for your website.
Totally. A behind-the-scenes peek on Instagram stories has a shelf life of a few hours, maybe a day. But a video on your website, that needs to have staying power.
So how do you decide? When's it time to call in a pro versus rolling up your sleeves and doing it yourself?
Samantha had a great analogy in her talk. She compared it to baking a cake.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So, if you're comfortable with the basics, you can whip up a simple recipe, no problem. But if you're trying to create a multi-tiered masterpiece for a wedding or something...
You're going to end up with a cake wreck. I've been there.
Exactly. Sometimes it's best to call in a professional baker, and it's the same with video. If you need those high-end motion graphics, complex sound mixing.
Or you're just short on time.
Exactly. Those are all good reasons to consider bringing in a pro. But for those times when you were DIYing it, Samantha had some great hacks for getting the most out of your phone, like using your body as a tripod.
Wait, what? How do you even... I can barely hold my phone still enough to take a selfie.
No, she's not talking about like contorting yourself. It's more about using your body's natural movements to create smoother shots when you're panning or tilting.
So instead of moving the phone itself, you're shifting your weight or pivoting your upper body.
Precisely. It takes a bit of practice, but it can make your shots look so much more stable. Less like a home video, more like.
Cinematic.
Exactly. And this next tip is especially useful for creating those cool sped up or slow motion effects. She's a big advocate for shooting in camera.
I've heard that term thrown around, but I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure what it means.
Basically, it means making those speed decisions while you're filming, not just relying on editing afterwards.
So instead of filming one long, continuous clip and then speeding it up or slowing it down later, you'd actually capture a series of shorter clips at the desired speed.
Exactly. It gives you way more control over the final effect. Plus, it can be a real time saver in the editing room.
That's brilliant. Okay, so since we're on the topic of editing, Samantha had a lot to say about audio, didn't she?
Oh, yeah, she did. You could tell it's something she's passionate about. She had this whole thing about microphones.
Those little furry ones?
Yes. She was like, if I see one more person using those indoors, apparently they're great for reducing wind noise outdoors.
Makes sense.
But indoors, they just pick up every little bump and rustle. It's overkill.
So ditch the furry mic covers.
Mm.
Unless you're filming a nature documentary, what's the go-to for good audio indoors?
Samantha's a big fan of lavalier microphones. You know, those little clip-on ones? A lot of YouTubers use them. They're super discreet. And they're really affordable, too. And they provide such clean audio, especially compared to just using your phone's built-in mic.
It's worth it if you want your videos to sound more professional. Now, I think one area where a lot of us struggle is the editing process. Any tips for making that feel less overwhelming?
One thing that really resonated with me was her advice to think of audio editing as storytelling.
Storytelling. Okay, how so?
It's not just about making the sound clear, it's about using those sounds strategically to really enhance your video's impact. Like she gave this example about a video from an event, and in the background you could hear the crowd reacting.
Oh yeah, I remember that. It totally added to the energy of the video.
Exactly. It's about capturing those authentic moments. She also talked about the importance of things like fading smoothly between clips and making sure you don't have any jarring jumps in volume.
Those little things can make such a difference.
Absolutely. Then she got into captioning, which is so important these days for accessibility.
Yes. I'll admit, captioning is something I need to get better at. It can be time-consuming, but...
Oh, totally. But she had this really simple tip, which I loved. She said, always read your captions out loud before you publish your video.
Oh, that's so smart. It's amazing how many mistakes you catch when you actually hear the words.
Right. And she also mentioned being mindful of caption placement, like making sure they're not covering up any important visuals or getting lost in the background.
All those little details that can make your video look more polished.
Speaking of polished, we've got to address the age-old debate.
Right.
Vertical versus horizontal video.
Ooh, the great debate.
Right. It's like a constant source of debate among video creators. So Samantha acknowledges that horizontal is still the standard for things like traditional media, like television. And YouTube still prefers it. But
On social media, it's a whole different story.
totally. With TikTok and Instagram Reels, vertical video is king.
Which makes sense given that most people are consuming that content on their phones.
Exactly. But she makes a really good point that if you shoot horizontally, it actually gives you more flexibility in post-production. You can always crop a horizontal video to fit a vertical format, but you can't magically add footage to the sides of a vertical video.
That is so true. It's like trying to stretch a too small t-shirt.
Perfect analogy. So her philosophy is to shoot horizontally in 4K at 60 FPS.
Best of both worlds.
Exactly. Maximum flexibility in the edit. Now, I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of your biggest video pet peeves? The things that make you cringe when you see them in other people's videos?
Oh man, where do I even begin? I think top of the list has to be bad lighting. It can make even the most interesting content look instantly amateurish.
It's true. And the thing is, it's often such an easy fix.
Right, like a little bit of effort goes a long way.
Exactly. Natural light is your best friend. If you can film near a window to get that nice soft light, do it, but...
Don't have the window directly behind you, otherwise you end up with that weird silhouette thing happening.
Exactly. You can also use inexpensive reflectors or even just like a big white piece of poster board to bounce some light back onto your subject and soften those shadows.
Great tips. What else gets you fired up when you're watching other people's videos?
This one might seem obvious, but shaky footage, I mean, come on, it's 2024.
Right. We have the technology.
There's really no excuse for it. Invest in a tripod. Or a gimbal, even. Especially if you're filming handheld, your viewers will thank you.
Another thing that I see a lot is people forgetting to edit out those dead spaces.
Those awkward pauses and ums and ahs.
Yes, or those moments where nothing is really happening. A good editor can work wonders to make those videos tighter, more engaging.
It's about striking that balance between authenticity and, professionalism.
Totally. And that's where knowing your audience comes in. I think a younger audience on a platform like TikTok might be more forgiving.
Totally. They embrace those raw, unfiltered moments.
Exactly. But for a more professional audience on LinkedIn, you probably want to present something a bit more polished. Context is key. Speaking of context, I love what Samantha said about being mindful of the shelf life of your videos. How do you create videos that have staying power?
It's all about focusing on evergreen content, information that's always relevant, and avoiding anything too trendy or, tied to a specific moment in time.
So instead of talking about the latest meme, maybe create a tutorial on a skill that's always in demand.
Precisely. And if you do need to create time-sensitive content, promote it heavily while it's still fresh, then...
Let it ride off into the sunset.
Exactly. Now, I want to get your take on incorporating music into video, because I think it can be such a powerful tool. But
It can also be really overused
yes.
or misused.
Yes. It's like seasoning your food. A little bit can enhance the flavor.
Too much, and it's just overwhelming.
I love that. And Samantha actually gave this really cool tip. She said she edits her videos first, and then she chooses music that complements the flow and the energy of what she's created visually.
Interesting. I usually try to find the music first and then edit to the beat.
I know, right? It seems counterintuitive, but her reasoning is that you want the visuals to drive the audio choices, not the other way around.
It's like creating the soundtrack to your video, rather than letting the soundtrack dictate your video.
Exactly. And she's all about choosing music that doesn't overpower the other elements, especially if you have dialogue or a voiceover.
Right, the music shouldn't compete with the message you're trying to get across.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where it elevates the emotion, but it's not distracting. And of course, always make sure you're using royalty-free music. You don't want to get hit with a copyright strike.
It's so important, especially if you're sharing your videos online. Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to touch briefly on the idea of actually working with a professional videographer, because, Samantha only briefly touched on it.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's such an important topic because finding the right videographer can make or break your project.
It's like finding a creative partner in crime, someone who gets your vision and can help you bring it to life.
Exactly. And like any good partnership, it all starts with communication.
So what are some key things you think people should be talking to their videographer about before they even get started?
Well, first and foremost, define your goals for the video. What are you hoping to achieve? Who are you trying to reach? What message are you trying to get across?
Having that clear creative brief is so essential.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to share examples of other videos you like, or even videos you don't like.
It's like creating a mood board for your video.
Yes. And of course, like any project, you want to talk about the budget up front and the timeline. Those factors can really influence the scope of what's possible.
Right, you don't want to fall in love with this elaborate, big-budget concept only to find out that it's not feasible.
Exactly. And lastly, I'd say trust your gut. Choosing a videographer is about more than just their technical abilities.
It's about creative synergy.
Exactly. It's a collaboration. So make sure you find someone you connect with on a personal level, someone you feel comfortable bouncing ideas off of.
Because you're trusting them with your vision. And with that, I think it's time for our viewers to transition from theory to practice.
I love it. It's time to put all this amazing advice into action. For our final segment, we're going to guide you through a few fun and practical challenges to help you flex those creative muscles.
All right, everyone, get those creative juices flowing. It's time to put all this video wisdom into practice.
That's right. We're not just about talking the talk here. We're going full-on video boot camp.
Love it. So no fancy cameras required, just
Yeah.
your phone and your imagination.
Exactly. We're going to throw out a few different scenarios, and your mission, should you choose to accept it,
Is to visualize how you'd bring these videos to life using all the tips and tricks we've been discussing.
Think of it as a creative workout, a chance to experiment without the pressure of actually having to hit publish. Ready for scenario number 1?
Hit me.
Okay, imagine you're creating a short social media reel showcasing your city or town. Could be for a travel blog, a local business, or just for fun.
Ooh. Okay, I'm already picturing those sweeping drone shots of the skyline. Maybe some time lapses of the traffic.
Hold on, pump the brakes. Remember what Samantha said about capturing a variety of shots. Don't just rely on those wide, sweeping views. Think about the smaller details that make your city unique. Those little hidden gems that only locals know about.
So instead of just filming the main tourist attractions straight on, maybe try shooting them from a low angle, to make them seem even grander.
Exactly. That's what Samantha calls the hero shot. Think about incorporating those little details that often get overlooked, those quirky things that give a place its character.
Like a colorful mural or a street performer doing their thing.
Yes, those are the things that will make your video stand out. Now let's add in another layer. Remember shooting in camera. How could you use that in this scenario?
Okay, so instead of filming one long shot of a busy street scene, I could capture a series of shorter clips, each one focused on a different person, and then maybe speed those up a bit in editing to create that fun, high-energy feel.
Now you're thinking. And while you're out and about capturing all these amazing shots, how can you use your body as a tripod to get those super smooth shots, even if you don't have a gimbal?
Okay, so instead of just standing there like a stiff board, I can try slowly pivoting my upper body as I'm filming to create a more natural pan.
Exactly, you're a natural. All right, ready for scenario number 2?
Bring it on.
This time, you're creating a short video tutorial, just like Samantha's, but on a skill you're passionate about, something you're good at and that you want to share with the world.
Ooh, okay. Let's say I'm teaching people how to make the perfect sourdough bread.
Perfect. Now remember how much emphasis Samantha put on clear audio for this type of video? No one wants to hear muffled instructions with a side of construction noise.
So finding a quiet spot to film is key.
Yeah.
And maybe I'd even break out that lavalier microphone we talked about earlier for that extra crisp, clear audio.
Excellent. Now let's talk composition and framing. Remember Samantha's advice on using those wide, medium, and tight shots to make your tutorial both visually appealing and easy to follow.
Okay, so I could start with a wide shot to establish the scene, my kitchen counter with all my ingredients and equipment. Then I could move into a medium shot as I'm kneading the dough so you can really see the technique.
I'm with you, and don't forget those close-ups.
Of course, got to get a nice tight shot of the finished loaf, all golden brown and delicious.
Okay, now you're making me hungry.
All right. Now, for a final touch, how can we weave in those establishing shots we talked about to really set the mood?
I'm glad you asked. Remember those evoke a feeling or create a sense of place?
Maybe I could start with a shot of my hands covered in flour, or a close-up of the yeast bubbling away in the bowl.
Love it. Those little details can make all the difference. All right, ready for one final challenge?
Lay it on me.
This time we're going full creative. Imagine you're making a short, silent film. No dialogue, just music and visuals.
Ooh, this is fun. I love silent films. It's amazing how much you can convey without saying a single word.
Exactly. This is where you really get to play with things like angles, perspectives, even props, to tell a story without relying on dialogue.
So instead of just filming a static shot of a person crying, maybe we see a single teardrop rolling down their cheek as they stare out a rain-streaked window.
Yes, you're getting it. Now, let's kick it up a notch. How could you use slow motion, or those jump cuts we talked about, to add an extra layer of emotion or tension to your silent film?
Ooh, okay. I could use slow motion to emphasize a particularly dramatic moment, or a series of jump cuts to build suspense, or maybe to show the passage of time.
I'm so impressed you've taken all these techniques and made them your own.
This has been so much fun. I feel like I've leveled up my video skills just by talking through these scenarios.
Me too. To recap for our listeners who are feeling inspired, remember what we've learned from Samantha. Experiment with those angles and perspectives. Master those basic camera settings. Don't underestimate the power of good audio.
Edit strategically, think like a storyteller, and most importantly, don't be afraid to break the rules.
And have fun. The more you experiment, the more confident you'll become as a video creator.
And who knows, you might just create something amazing. This deep dive has been incredible. We've learned so much about harnessing the power of video, and we hope you have too. From those technical basics to those all-important creative flourishes, it's all about finding your voice and sharing your vision with the world.
And remember, video creation isn't about perfection. It's about taking that first step, hitting record, and letting your creativity flow.
So grab your phones, experiment, have fun, and keep those cameras rolling. We can't wait to see what you create. Until next time, happy filming.